Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, America. You are now listening to Mi Casa es Su Casa, and I am your host once again, Niko House. I want to thank you all so much for tuning in for our 6th episode. And today we're actually going to be discussing the Women's March. If you follow me on YouTube, you know we've already addressed it a little bit, but wanted to talk about it a little bit more here because, well, you know, it's always nice to be able to download stuff and listen to it for later, because what's going to happen is we're going to come back to this discussion next year and y'all going to be like, you know what, god damn, Niko was right again. But hey, I'll let you be the judge of that. With that being said, I do want to go ahead and get started, but first I would like to urge you all to join our $1 follow $1 campaign on Patreon. You can do so by going to www.patreon.com/mikasesukasa and just donating $1. That's it. That would help the show immensely. It would also show your support in the fight against establishment media. Let them know that if they will not invest in the truth, then we will invest in those who will. So like I said, just go to www.patreon.com/mikasesukasa. Now, I want to go ahead and give a full disclaimer, just so you can understand my personal background with the Women's March and how I came to the conclusions that I came to, you know, with this most recent one, or just the Women's March movement in general. So, many of you may not know, but before I lived in Miami, I did live in New York. And so the first Women's March I went to was the one in New York City, which I believe at the time was the largest recorded Women's March in the world. It was freaking massive. And I was under the personal impression that the march would just be about women's issues, policies that protect the autonomy of women, you know, making sure that if they choose that they want to have an abortion or they want to maintain autonomy over their bodies, then they have that ability to do so. You know, making sure that they can have access to health care when necessary, you know, equal pay rights for women, things like that, you know, the things that women have to deal with on a regular basis. So when I went, I didn't actually know what to expect because I was a little skeptical. I'm sure that many of you all have, you know, either been to a protest or even planned a protest. But if you're in the category that's planned protest, then you would know planning a large scale protest in a matter of a few weeks is damn near impossible, especially in a place like New York. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about that later. But so I was going in skeptical, like maybe that many people aren't going to show up. But that was not the case. It was a total opposite, actually. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people showed up to the protests in New York. And so I, you know, participated. I went with a couple of friends, but I was mostly there, once again, even though I was there for support, I was also there to interview people, to get their feel about what was going on in regards to women's rights in the political environment, in the current political environment. So, I started becoming a little bit more reluctant as I started to see signs that said that, you know, all the Russia stuff. It was a lot of "We want Hillary" signs, a lot of anti-Trump signs, a lot of clever vaginal puns. A lot of clever puns about Trump's hair and the fact that he was orange. Not a lot of policy talk, though. In fact, at the New York rally, it was mostly a march, and there wasn't really that many people speaking. I know that like at the DC one, there was a lot of speakers, but at the New York rally, there wasn't a lot of speakers. It was mostly a march. So I decided to interview a woman two women actually. They were older, Caucasian women. I wanted to know why, because we were having a pretty good conversation. I was like, well, why are you, what do you think the march is about? And she was like, what do you mean? It's an anti-Trump rally. I said, excuse me? I thought this was a women's march, like for solidarity amongst women, to discuss women's issues, to issue demands, policy demands for women's issues. No, this is an anti-Trump rally. And the other one thought it was a pro-Hillary rally. both of these I thought was false for good reason. Because the Women's March was not described as that. Because if it would be described as that, as most of you all know, I probably would not have showed up. I think it's safe to say that. However, it was sold as if it was a concentration of women's issues and, obviously a march to show solidarity amongst women. But that was not the case. So I started looking even more, I started becoming even more skeptical. I started looking around, and the more I was looking, I was like, you know what? I turned to my friend and said, hey, do you feel like there's something off about this rally? And she looked at me, she said, yeah, actually, I do. Actually, I feel the same way. She didn't want to be the damper, the Debbie Downer on the, she didn't want to rain on anybody's parade, no pun intended, but she felt the same way that I did. And it felt like a neoliberal circle jerk, to be totally honest with you. I mean, this is really what it felt like. Now, this year was not much different. Some small changes that were, I guess, positive. But what kind of made me even more, because the same thing happened this year, but what made me question the legitimacy of this march, of this quote-unquote protest, was when we got to a restaurant afterwards. They pulled up CNN on the television screen, and the march was literally everywhere. All over. MSNBC, CNN, Anderson Cooper was discussing it. Joy-Ann Reid was talking about it. Rachel Maddow was talking about it. I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Hold on. This can't be a legitimate protest. Any protest that is going to bring for a fact it's going to bring change that the establishment doesn't want, it's not going to be covered by CNN or MSNBC or New York Times or Washington Post. But it was. So with my experience from last year, I decided I'm going to sit this one out and try to look at it from a different perspective. I want to see how people view it. I want to hear from the personal experiences of people who that I know are progressive. Like, I know they are constantly fighting for issues that aren't just out, talked about out in the open regularly by the establishment media, like Standing Rock and things like that. So I asked a few people, and they said it was very feel good, but they gave me the same responses as I felt it was last year, which was, there was not really a lot of issues about, or a lot of talks about issues. It was more so just a bunch of witty banter, nice little puns. It was like a pep rally for a sporting event you're never going to arrive at. That's pretty much what it was. So I want you all, whoever went to the Women's March, I want you all to think about this. I want you all to listen to this, the facts, and then let me know what you think. Well, you can let me know, or you can even talk to your friends and see if they feel the same way. Because I think these are facts that aren't often considered by people. Because if you're not involved in politics, right, it's very easy to overlook small detail, political details. When you're in activism mode, it's very easy to, if you're in activism mode and you don't pay attention to politics, two different things. Sometimes they are the same thing, but most of the time they're two different. The understanding of each it takes two different types of mindsets. But if you're not, involved in politics, or if you don't understand politics, little details can kind of go right past you and you wouldn't even realize it. Things that you would not consider a big deal. So let's start at the top, right? Let's look at who was invited to speak. Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Whew. First of all, pause. Debbie Wasserman Schultz is currently under criminal investigation at the federal level. She's also being sued by Jared and Elizabeth Beck in a class action lawsuit, the DNC fraud lawsuit. Debbie Wasserman Schultz is also responsible for a lot of the situations that most of you are familiar with now, thanks to Donna Purcell, with the Hillary Victory Fund. She's the reason, not 100%, but she's about 60% of the reason that Donald Trump was allowed to win, because she cheated Bernie Sanders. All the fears that you have of Donald Trump have managed to come into fruition. Some of them, not all of them, but some of them have managed to come into fruition because Debbie Wasserman Schultz refused to act even-handedly during the Democratic primary, during her tenure as the chairwoman of the Democratic National Committee, in case many of you forgot that. But hey, and she's under federal investigation. Remember Imran Awan, the Awan brothers scandal? Yeah, that's still happening. So she's under investigation for that. But she was invited to speak. That's a little weird, don't you think? But okay, let's move on. Anthony Rendon, people. For those of you who do not know who Anthony Rendon is, this is the Speaker of the California Assembly who killed single payer in California. Establishment left Democrat, once again. Why was Anthony Rendon asked to speak at a women's march when he's clearly not for the interest of women? Because as most of you all know, if you are a woman, I shouldn't have to really explain this to you, but if you want me to break it down to you, who is afflicted most by the lack of available, affordable healthcare in this country? I'm going to give you a clue. I am a man. I know, surprise, surprise, but I am a man. I don't have to give birth to anybody or anything ever in my life. Thank Jesus, Buddha, and Allah. I couldn't handle it. I'm a punk. I'm a tough guy, but at the same time, I'm the kind of guy that like if a spider walks into the room, I'm running the opposite direction. I'm throwing my girlfriend right in front of it, saying, "Defend me until your death, and I will honor you with a cremation and a 21 gun salute." But I'm not touching that spider. That's the kind of guy I am. So, and I like when it comes to pain, I'm not a glutton for pain. Seriously. So if I had to give birth, it would be, I'd die immediately. I would tell him to go back in. You're not coming out. You're living in me for the rest of my life. But women have to deal with that, right? Okay. Not only giving birth, but the entire process of being pregnant, which requires a lot of different doctor's visits. They have to go through wellness visits. The odds of me getting breast cancer are obviously extremely low. At my age, it's extremely low compared to a woman. I've never had cysts on my ovaries because I don't have any ovaries. But cysts on ovaries are a common thing. I've never had to deal with my menstrual cycle. I've never had to be on birth control. I've never had to deal with any of the many things that women have to worry about possibly dealing with on a daily basis. And many women do deal with on a daily basis. So when it comes to healthcare, women absolutely need access to it more than men do. Anthony Rendon is responsible for the death of single payer in California, and yet here we are. He's speaking at who would think that would be a good idea? Okay, so that's the second strike. Then you have Representative John R. Lewis. You remember John Lewis, right? The one who said that Bernie Sanders was not anywhere to be found during the civil rights movement, even though he was standing right beside him as he was giving a speech during a civil rights rally. The same one who claimed that Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton were actually involved in the civil rights movement. Mind you, Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton, first and second lady, or first lady and governor of Arkansas were the ones who started Confederate Flag Day, celebrated religiously, if you all recall. You don't remember that? I do. Hillary Clinton, the Goldwater girl. Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton, Mr. Three Strikes. That's what I like to call him. And Pimp and Clang, y'all know that. But yeah. John R. Lewis. A male, by the way. And Anthony Rendon, by the way. A male. Remember whenever they were having a little pre-Women's March rally around November, around the disaster in Puerto Rico? Remember they invited Bernie Sanders to speak? Or someone thought it was a good idea to invite Bernie Sanders to speak, and the women in the Women's March went absolutely bonkers because they could not believe that they invited Bernie Sanders, you know, the one who has been championing every type of disenfranchised issue that you could think of. But then we have John Lewis and Anthony Rendon. You are the company you keep. Isn't that what they say? You are the company you keep. But we can even take it a step further. So let's look at the next thing. Let's look at who they did not invite. Susan Sarandon, who is clearly a progressive, has done amazing things in the activist community and the progressive community, is very outspoken against the establishment. Is very outspoken against Wall Street, very outspoken against corporatism. Very outspoken against progressives. Okay, she was not invited to speak. Rosario Dawson, same thing. I want to know another thing they have in common, coincidentally enough. They were both Bernie Sanders surrogates. Who else was not invited? Bernie Sanders. After being invited the first time, in November, October, November-ish. And they pretty much bullied him out of going to speak. He was not re-invited. But John R. Lewis and Anthony Rendon were, with no pushback. Okay, once again, company you keep. Guess who else wasn't invited? This amazing, astounding wife of one Bernie Sanders, who was the president of a university, the president now of the Sanders Institute, one of Bernie Sanders' leading consultants during his campaign. A phenomenal mind just overall. Jane Sanders. Interesting. Wonder why she wasn't invited. She's a woman, I thought. I'm pretty sure she is. So you can't use the whole, oh, it's a man excuse. Even though that went out the window anyway, considering Anthony Rendon and John Lewis spoke. But Jane Sanders wasn't invited. Interesting. Okay. Dr. Jill Stein was not invited. That's interesting. It wasn't. She's a woman, and she was a presidential candidate in the year that being a woman as a presidential candidate meant you should have automatically won because you're a woman. So I know they didn't forget about her. I mean, Jill Stein was legitimately a champion of women's issues, and not only women's issues, but progressive issues in general, including the environment, anti-imperialism, anti-corporatist, anti-Wall Street, anti-everything you could think of that has to do with the establishment. Maybe that has something to do with why she didn't get picked, but let's move on. Tulsi Gabbard. She's actually a Democrat still, but she wasn't even invited to speak, even though she's one of the most really influential Democrats in the progressive wing right now. Samira Khan, former Miss New Jersey, Bernie Sanders delegate, reporter for the RT. She was not invited either. I'm starting to see a little pattern here. It seems like any woman or person in general who was not loyal to the establishment wing of the Democratic Party was not invited to the Women's March. Ding, ding, ding. That should be a huge red flag to everyone involved. Seriously. Look at who they invited. Look at who they did not invite. Now, why is this important? Well, in politics, you can learn more from what isn't being said than what is being said. You can learn more from implicit actions, implicit intentions, than you can from the explicit. What issues were discussed? It was a bunch of complaining about Donald Trump. He sucks. A lot of people agree with you. It's not going to stop him from winning in 2020. I'm being very clear and very honest about that. Y'all know where I stand. From a strategic standpoint, y'all can throw whatever poll out there you want, but there is one person in this country that can beat Donald Trump. That's Bernie Sanders. Nobody's going to jump off their feet and get out their seats to go vote for freaking Joe Biden, who is boring. Not to mention, he'll get exposed really fast. He will get exposed by progressives. He will get exposed in the primary. He will get beat down in the primary so much that if they try to cheat to make sure that he wins, he will get exposed and he will be another candidate beat the hell down by Donald Trump. But there was no issues being discussed. For example, why wasn't minimum wage or the wage gap in general being discussed? Because if you want to eat, we can make it a nonpartisan, a non-gender specific issue, non-sex specific issue, but women are still by far affected by it more so than anybody else. For example, who do you believe are the primary group that are single parents? Probably women, right? So if you're a woman, you've had a couple of kids, maybe you get divorced, maybe the father's not involved. You're already going to be underpaid. You're going to be, according to all the statistics, you are going to be underpaid 90% of the time. And on top of that, depending on where you live at, your minimum wage is nothing. You're at $8-9 an hour max. So who does the minimum wage affect more? Men or women? Women. I'll answer it for you. So why wasn't that discussed? Like I said, we already know who healthcare affects more. We can even look at imperialism, people. If you are the wife, the mother in the military, you have kids, and say you and your spouse are not together, you have to leave them somewhere, deploying to fight some rich white guy's war. And whoever going to be like, why isn't it a rich black man? Because rich black men don't get to start wars. we haven't climbed that ladder yet. But you're going to go off and fight some rich white guy's war. Or you can be on the other side of that fence. Say you were the army wife. Right? And your husband's always deployed, which means you have to pull all the way in the house because your husband is never home, once again, to fight some rich white man's war for 10 years. Referencing the war in Iraq, the war in Afghanistan. If you're special forces, you're familiar with the 90s, with Syria, not Syria, Libya. You know what I'm referring to. So, all of the main issues progressives deal with, really affect women more than anybody else. And yet, there was no discussion of the real issues. What do they like to call them? The sexy issues. That's what they discussed. They wanted to talk about the DACA. Most of these people don't even know what DACA is. Like, I'll be honest with you. They want to yell about Trump. They want to talk about like DACA and then some women's rights issues that aren't even really like being challenged at this very moment. If you're in California, 90% of your women's rights issues are going to be squared away. Same thing in New York. You have nothing to worry about. Relax. Like I said during the election, New York is not all of a sudden going to become Alabama because Donald Trump got elected, just like Alabama would not all of a sudden become, New York or California because Hillary Clinton got elected. It's not how politics work. Politics are local. And most of you all aren't involved. And that's why you're freaking out, because now the news is shoving something in your face where you're overreacting instead of using pragmatism. We had a march out here in Miami. Some of you may be familiar with it. It was an environmental march. Miami obviously is one of the places that are greatly affected by any of the environmental changes. Woo, man, it's been cold as hell out here too. Oh God. Y'all, I woke up the other day. It was 39 degrees outside. I'm telling y'all, I was going to sue the governor. I was going to sue the mayor of Miami. I was going to sue the owners of Club Live, King of Diamonds. I was going to sue the commissioner. I was trying to sue anybody I absolutely could because I did not move down here for this shit. It was cold as hell. It's been cold. I got sick twice in 2 weeks. I'm not feeling it, bro. But we had that, which is why I was at the environment march in full effect. Like, fix it, Jesus. I was like, fix it. But seriously, we had you know what the march was? We had the same thing, speakers, a rally beforehand. We even had merchandise out there. But guess what? We also had specific policy demands for the mayor, for the commissioner, for the legislature in Florida. That was the difference. There was no bashing of people. That's divisive. There was no bashing of anybody. It was, let's talk policy. And immigration was discussed. But it was discussed from a policy standpoint. It was an educational discussion, not a rah-rah, okay, what's next discussion. We are at a time right now where we have to be pragmatic, and the Women's March is counterproductive to that because they're one of the things that they had people talking about doing, we need all of you women to get out there and vote. I mean, get out there and vote, one, but also get out there and run for office. And that sounds freaking fantastic, right? Until you remember, they've already selected their establishment candidates around the country already. The problem is they're still in their Democratic primaries, people. They're still in the Democratic primaries, and they've already selected and that was uncovered by Mike Sonato in his article in The Real News. I urge you all to go follow him on Twitter. Mike Sonato. It's like at MSAINATO. Follow that guy. Great stuff. But yeah, they don't tell you that. They're also asking you to run for office, also without addressing election fraud. It wasn't even uttered. It wasn't even uttered. The words election fraud, oh no, don't mention that because then somebody's going to bring up Hillary Clinton. So you're going to tell these women to get out and vote? We're going to tell these women to run for office? But we're not going to confront the issues stopping them from being successful at either of those things. We're not, like right now in LA, they're not going to confront election fraud, but they're dealing with election fraud right at this very moment. In fact, the only women's march, or it was something like a women's march, that I probably would condone is the one that was done by Stephanie Myers in Miami. She was the one. She did it last year. and it was kind of separate from the Women's March. It was all about issues. That's all they talked about. And that, I was like, wow, I wish I would have been here for that, because that would have been an awesome contrast to get on video. You're not going to win. They're trying to get you to hate Trump so much that you'll vote for anybody who gets thrown in your face. That's not going to work, people. It's not. Because guess what? All the women who are out there marching, most of them already voted. And guess what? I'm glad that the Women's March in Colorado was big. Pretty sure that Hillary won Colorado. I'm glad that the Women's March in California was huge. Hillary Clinton won in California. I'm glad that the Women's March in New York was massive. Hillary Clinton won New York. Are you starting to see the pattern here? It's redundant. Why? Because one, you're not talking about issues, not the real ones. Women's issues are real issues, but you're not even talking about those. You just got a bunch of vaginal puns and pussy hats on, people. Come on now. Let's look at some of the people who donated to the Women's March. Planned Parenthood, establishment. National Resource Defense Council, establishment. National Action Network, American Civil Liberties Union. All of these establishment wings of the Democratic Party that donate to the super PACs of the Democrats, that donate to the establishment candidates of the Democrats. I want to leave you with this. I want to tell you the story about the NYPD officer that I talked to when I was at the New York Women's March. Whenever I was standing there and we were like just laughing and joking, having a good time, talking about how damn cold it was outside, I saw this NYPD officer who just looked really relaxed, really calm. I was like, wow. He's like, yeah, we might have to extend this, man. This is getting way bigger than I thought. I said, oh, that's what's up, man. Like, that sucks that you have to be out here for long. He's like, no, it's fine, man. It's some easy money. And I was like, whoa, double back. What do you mean it's easy money? He said, oh, yeah, we're being paid extra to be out here. I said, hold up. Somebody's paying you to be out here. That's unexpected. Who the hell can foot the bill for the entire NYPD to watch a march? Better yet, any legitimate rally, protest, march that I have been to, the police are not friendly to people. The police are out there in riot gear, if you all recall. It doesn't matter if the protest is peaceful or not, they're out there in riot gear, period. Especially the NYPD. But he was like, no, we're getting paid extra. I'm out here on extra duty, and it is what it is. I said, that's peculiar. Now, since when? Who has the bank account to fund the NYPD guarding and guiding a women's march that large, of that scale? Why were they not reactionary? They weren't aggressive. To my knowledge, it was the same way with the LAPD. That's really weird, because that's not usually how marches and protests go down, right? God forbid that many black people ever gathered in one place after something crazy happened. Whew. We know how it would go down. Look at Ferguson, look at Baltimore, look at New York. We know exactly how it would go down. Look at Texas. And then let's look at the fact that, once again, CNN, MSNBC, Rachel Maddow, all these people, the establishment wing of media, covered this both times. Any legitimate protest, any legitimate march, any legitimate rally would not be covered. Not to that scale, not to that degree. So let's be clear about something. The Women's March The Women's March, by the way, the same Women's March in which the leaders have been paid to sit on their board positions the entire year. I know because we have one of the board members here in Florida running for office. She refuses to relinquish that position even though she's supposed to. But they've been sitting the entire year getting paid every single month for a women's march that takes place once a year. How do you do that unless you got some big money bankrolling you? Because not that many people donated, I promise you that. Some things to think about, people. Some things to think about. So thank you all so much for watching or for listening. Sorry, I'm used to being on YouTube. Which, by the way, you should follow if you don't already. But thank you all so much for listening. It's greatly appreciated. Definitely will be back tomorrow. And like I said, donate to the One Follow $1 campaign on Patreon. I'll go ahead and post the link in the description. And always remember, people, find your balance. Peace.